Hi, welcome to One Eye on the Page. I am Scott. It is the August end of month overview. I read 21 books this month. I would say I had several good books. I actually had 2 5-stars this month, and I've only had 1 5-star previous this year. I had a couple of bad books, and I had a lot of books that were mediocre, right in the middle, not good or bad, had some good points, had some bad points. But I'm going to go over the books from worst to first. At number 21, we're starting with Unfortunately Yours by Tessa Bailey. This is the second book that I've read by Tessa Bailey. I don't think that I would have read this if I didn't already have it. I bought It Happened One Summer based on reviews I had seen of it, and I happened to pass this book in the store, and I picked it up kind of on a whim. Unfortunately for me, 2 people in it. One of them, Natalie, is fine, if not particularly interesting. Cat messing with it. She marries August in order to get her trust fund. He needs to be able to get a loan. Being married into her family will help with that. A bunch of stuff goes back and forth, but basically he goes into this marriage already lying to her, basically trying to gaslight her into loving him, which this is a romance book. It works. He's a horrible person. He's supposed to be a Navy SEAL. His best friend, who was also a Navy SEAL, died. If he was in charge, I understand why he died, because he probably directly contributed to that man's death. Horrible person, a controlling, possessive, jealous asshole. Probably it's up there for my top 2 least favorite male characters. I think the top female least character is probably the overall character from Something Fabulous. I don't know that anybody can top her, but I can't remember the guy's name, but from The Hating Game, Joshua Templeman from The Hating Game. Those are the 2 worst male characters that I've read this year. He's just a horrible character. I do not see myself reading Tessa Bailey again. It Happened One Summer was an okay book. Overhyped, I think, by a lot of people, but this one was truly awful, and I can't do that again. Number 20 is Giant's Bread by Agatha Christie. Giant's Bread is a book that Agatha Christie wrote under the name Mary Westmacott. I am doing a 5-year battle, Agatha Christie, where I take 5-year periods of the author's published works and pick the best book out of that, and then have all the number 1 books end up fighting for the overall number 1 Agatha Christie book. I've never read any of the Mary Westmacott books before, so I decided that I was going to include them in the 5-year battle, so I had to read them. This is the first one. It's the longest one. I never read Mary Westmacott because I was under the impression that they were romance novels. They sort of are, but not really. It's about a man named Vernon. We basically see most of his life growing up. He he dislikes music until he's like 20 or 21, when he sees a concert, falls in love with music, decides he's going to be a composer. If you're looking for any information on how he becomes a composer, what he does to learn about music, you're not going to get it in here. He has one very interesting conversation about an opera that he's planning to write, but nothing about the music for the opera. The opera itself just sounds interesting. Otherwise, very little about his career. He is in love at different times with two different women. This is a lot like the characters in an Agatha Christie mystery. The problem is that the characters in an Agatha Christie mystery usually aren't that interesting except as they relate to the mystery. There's no mystery here. There's romance and there's World War One and there's music, and it's just not good. I haven't talked about it on the vlog yet, but I will get more into my issues with the book on the vlog. It's my second worst book of the month. It is not going to be very high up on the 5-year battle, Agatha Christie's for the years 1926 through 1930. Book number 19 is Anne of the Island by L.M. Montgomery. It is the third book in the Anne of Green Gables series. The book so far, as you will see in this countdown, have worsened with each book. This is book 3. She is ages 18 through 22 in this now. She goes off to college. The worst part about this book, and I will explain about the worst part of book 2, which is also in this book, but at a very limited amount. But the worst part about this is Anne. Anne, who is the best part, I think, of book 1, and probably the best part of book 2, is unlikable in this. She is judgmental and hateful, and her romantic life I just didn't care about at all. Just slight spoilers in here. I won't go into details, but she gets proposed to 6 times. 5 different people. A little over the top. All the qualities about Anne that I liked in the previous books are just not there. Anne is the worst part of this book. I said previously, I don't know if I'm going to read book 4 and beyond in this. Based on this, no. But there's always the possibility that the quality might go back up to what there was in the original Anne of Green Gables. But based on this, no. Book number 18 is The Knocked Up Plan by Lauren Blakely. I have read 5 books by Lauren Blakely. The 4 that I read this month are all part of a One Love series that I got on Kindle Unlimited, 4 books in 1 volume. And I got that based on my love of Double Pucked, which was a book I expected to laugh at, and I actually really liked it. The books in the One Love series are not at the same level as Double Pucked. None of them are. This one is about a woman who decides she wants to have a baby. She talks to a co-worker named Ryder, and I'm tired of the name Ryder in romance books. And he agrees to do it, but his caveat is that they have to do it the old-fashioned way, which is a little creepy, quite honestly, to me. They're co-workers, and they're both like relationship gurus, although they're both not good at relationships. He, in particular, is awful at relationships, and the fact that he gives advice to other men which is not good advice. It's just laughable. Uh, all of the books in the One Love series have issues. A lot of them have to do with inappropriateness. This one is probably not that much on the level of inappropriateness. They are coworkers, but they don't oversee each other, and they don't really do anything at work, as is the case in some of the other books. But they are the least likable couple of these books. They are probably the least likable man and the least likable woman in these 4 books. And I just didn't care about them at all. Also, a common theme with these books is there are roadblocks brought up in the books, and then they're just kind of stepped around, and there's not a lot of conflict in the book, really, or in any of the books. Book number 17 is the collected short stories of Guy de Maupassant, Volume 5. I read 3 short story collections by him this month. This was the worst one. It was all of his traits that started to get on my nerves a little bit. Not a lot happens in the stories, and what does happen is always an unhappy ending. You know where the ending's going pretty much right away. Characters either are talking about something that happened to them in the past, or they were told the story by somebody else. And none of the stories are particularly interesting. And I've gone into a lot of detail about these stories in my blog. So if you care about me highlighting almost every story, you can check those out. Book number 16 is Vicious by VE Schwab, which is basically about 2 college roommates who attempt near-death experiences in order to get superpowers, and then they are at odds after that. And basically, it's going back and forth from 10 years ago when they were in college to the present day, where it's all coming to a head. Neither of the main characters are interesting. There are interesting characters in there, but they're side characters. And this is probably the first book that I would say gets close to the mediocre. It's like, it was fine, but there's a second book in this series, and I don't think I'm going to read it. Book number 15 is Psmith in the City by P.G. Wodehouse. This is the one book this month that I have read before. I've not read any of these other books before. I read it for a podcast that I do with my daughter called I'll Be Dash, a Wodehouse podcast. We're going to actually be recording the podcast for this on Saturday in 2 days. I enjoyed this more the first time I read it. But the problem is when you're doing something for a podcast and I'm taking notes on this, and I've also got my daughter who really dislikes the character of Smith, and I'm reading it, and I can see why she dislikes the character of Smith. Smith is one of those characters who nothing bad ever really happens to him. Nothing seems to affect him. He's condescending even to his friends. He's strangely belligerent while playing innocent, and he's not a likable character. Mike Jackson, who is his friend, is a very likable character, and it's very interesting, and he was the main character of the previous Mike and Smith books. There's the novel Mike, which contains novels Mike at Riken and Mike and Smith. which were combined into Mike. Psmith is more the main character here, and he actually becomes even more of a main character in the following Psmith books. And he's just not. It's there's no way to be empathetic with him because nothing ever happens to him. Listen to our podcast. Number 14 is Alice's Adventure in Wonderland. Yeah, I know it's a classic. Alice grated on my nerves. That's pretty much it. I think that I read this book too late in life. And I was just annoyed. I've never read it before. I've seen clips of the movie. I don't think that I've ever watched the full movie. Yeah, just not my bag. Number 13 is Anne of Avonlea, which is book 2 in the Anne of Green Gables series. This covers the ages of 16 through 18. Anne is out of school, but because of the family situation, she doesn't go to college, which of course she does in the third book. So what she does is she teaches at the school where she was just a student, teaching many of the students that she had been going to school with. That's interesting. I like Anne in here. I like a lot of the side characters. The big problem is that Anne and Marilla, her adopted mother for all purposes, take in Davy and Dora, who are the twin children, age 6 at the time they come, of Marilla's third cousin who passed away. Dora is essentially perfect, never has to be disciplined, always does things correctly. So they find her boring. Davy's a little terror who is a bit of a sadist, as many 6-year-old boys are, and is always causing trouble and is just a pain in the ass. So, of course, they admit to themselves that they love him more. The reason that this book is down this low is solely because of Davy. There's just sometimes where there's one single character who's in a book who brings down the book for you. If Davy wasn't in this, if you just excise Davy and Dora, because they don't really care about Dora. The author doesn't really seem to care about Dora. If you just took them out of the novel, I did probably close to the top 5, but Davy ruins it. Book number 12 is the hot one, which is book 2 of the One Love series by Lauren Blakely. This involves, I'm trying to recall because there's 4 of them. Delaney and Tyler, who were college sweethearts, but Tyler broke up with Delaney because he felt he needed to concentrate on school. He was a law student. She was also a law student. They meet years later. He is an entertainment lawyer now. She is a massage therapist. He tries to strike up the relationship again. As I mentioned with the Knocked Up Plan, there's some inappropriateness, not with the two of them because they're in 2 different careers, but they do stuff at their respective works, which I'm kind of like, no, why would you do that? And I have to say, there's a lot of sex in these 4 books. It's kind of boring and repetitious. Which, if you want a Lauren Blakely book that has a lot of interesting sex, check out Double Buck. The characters themselves were fine. They definitely made more sense to me than in the Knocked Up Plan, but they weren't particularly interesting. I would say as a couple, they're the third best one. Then number 11 is book 4 in the One Love series by Lauren Blakely. It's Come As You Are. It's about Tyler, a millionaire who is always getting women try to get with him because of money or prestige. And he's tired of that. He meets a woman. I've forgotten her name. I apologize. She is a reporter, but she has been laid off. They both go to a masquerade party. They end up banging it out. And then the next day, she gets hired to write an article about him. At this masquerade party, they were wearing masks. They don't know who the other person they were with at the time, which is a little bit unsafe. Don't do that, people. And if you do, use protection, which I believe they did. They did. They meet after she has done this, and they realize who they really are. And of course, getting together when she's writing an article about him is inappropriate. And they really walk that line on appropriateness. Thought it was decent. The couple, they're fine people. I just don't really see them necessarily together, but the overall story was interesting. There's a lot of logic flaws in it to me, but it was a pleasurable enough read. Book number 10 is The Red House Mystery by A.A. Milne, who most of you will know as the author of the 100 Acre Woods series. It's a mystery, obviously. It's fine, except one, there aren't very many suspects. So it's kind of easy to pin down who the murderer is. And it's very short. Super short. Yeah, it was a good book. It's just there wasn't a lot of suspense because you kind of knew where it was leading, and it was over quickly. So apparently this is the only mystery he wrote. Would have been interesting to see him write another one, a bit longer, more suspects. Based on what I read here, I think that could have been interesting, but that's just not what we got. It was fine. It had the potential to be much better. Number 9 is the Crepes of Wrath, Crepes, by Sarah Fox. This is another mystery. It's set at a pancake house where the main character is running it for her uncle, who is in the hospital, and he ends up getting murdered, and she kind of investigates, but not really. She's not really a detective, and she has no detective skills. And she's a nice character, but she doesn't do the smart thing. Like, she gets both her work and her house broken into, and at no point does she go like, maybe I should set up some cameras or something. And that, she was a pleasurable character to read, but as a mystery went, it wasn't overwhelming. I did not guess who the murderer was. It did pretty much point me in one direction, and I was looking in that direction. It makes sense who the murderer was, kind of. But it was a fun read. But if you're really into mysteries and you want to like take notes and try to solve it yourself, it's probably not that type of mystery that you're going to enjoy. It's something you would read on a plane, and then mostly forget about. You enjoyed it while you were on the plane, but by the time you got to the baggage carousel, kind of left your head. Number 8 is The Sexy One, the last book by Lauren Blakely. It was the first book. I will say I enjoyed the book. I liked the couple. It was another thing where there were roadblocks put in front of them, and then they just kind of stepped around them, and it was fine. It's also the one with the most inappropriate relationship because she's his nanny. So that's and apparently this is something that happens a lot in romances. I've already read one other book in the past couple of months that had this situation. You know, it's not appropriate. It's not unique, but it was fun as a couple. As long as you kind of don't look at the whole nanny thing, yeah, they were probably the most enjoyable couple. Because you know, I think I would have enjoyed it even with the inappropriate relationship if there was just more to it. If it had been 50 pages longer and like some of the roadblocks that were brought up were actually roadblocks and they had to work around them. But they didn't. Number 7 is an unromantic comedy by Phoebe MacLeod. I couldn't remember the name of the author for a second. It's about a sex and relationship therapist who goes to spend basically a week with her family. Her sister is getting married. She basically has to step in for all her family members with relationship issues or, you know, kind of mental health issues. There is a romance, but it's very much secondary to the interplay with their family. I really the only reason I didn't rank this book higher because I enjoyed it. It was amusing, and I liked some of the characters. Is her mother assume that because she was a sex therapist that she was basically watching people have sex? And to me, that's just ridiculous that her mother thinks this about her daughter, who's been doing this for a while, doesn't talk to anybody else in the family, or if she has, everybody else in the family believes this also, doesn't do any research on it, doesn't talk to her daughter about it, just is judgmental about it. That was completely ridiculous, and that's really the only reason why it's not higher up. Number 6 is Glitterland by Alexis Hall. Alexis Hall, if you have watched previous videos, is the author of Something Fabulous, which is the only fiction book that I ranked lower than Unfortunately Yours. It is, so far, the worst fiction book of the year. I read Glitterland basically because my daughter suggested I do so. It is a very good book. I think it's a little short. I think that one of the dramatic scenes in there is a little overblown, and I've mentioned before, I don't mind being manipulated. I mind it when I can feel my strings being pulled, and I felt that. But overall, very good book. It's probably the last Alexis Hall book I'm going to read because I read a good Alexis Hall book, and I don't want to run into another Something Fabulous. So I'm glad I read it. Thank you, sir, and I do not want another. Books 5 and 4 are the collected short stories of Guy de Maupassant, volumes 4 and volume 6. Uh, Lots of good stories in here. a little bit different than what I was mentioning before with him. The main reason Volume 6 ranks a little bit higher is there are several stories in here that go into the horror realm, which I think really works with his writing style, with the tropes that he uses. And it was really just a great change of pace to have those. I like with Anne of Green Gables, I don't know when I'm going to read these again because I have September pretty full. Unlike Anne of Green Gables, I do know that I will be reading the next book in the series. These are two great collections, especially after Volume 5 kind of crapped the bed. Book number 3 is Anne of Green Gables, which is the first book of the series. It came close to a 5-star rating for me by L.M. Montgomery. It's about Anne Shirley, who comes to live with a brother and sister who are elderly. She comes from an orphanage. They were expecting to get a boy, but there was a mix-up and they got her instead. They decide to keep her. Anne in this book is just a delight. And pretty much every other character, even the characters that at the beginning who, when I first met them, I'm just like, oh, I'm going to hate you. I liked all the characters in this book. I liked the relationships. I liked how Anne was a great character and a very good person, but also flawed, but not unlikable like she is in book 3. This is just a great book. This book I would read again, no hesitation. I would not read book 2 or 3 again. I believe there's like 8 books in the series. Again, I don't know if I will read the rest of the series, but I could definitely see going back to this one. And then we come up to our 2 5-star books. They're pretty close. I do like one slightly more than the other. Book number 2, 5-star, is Animal Farm by George Orwell. Again, a book I've never read before. It's a very short book, so if you haven't read it, please pick it up. It's a quick read. It's an allegory for, Russian politics, basically, and it's kind of just a demonstration of like power corrupts. You know, those who aren't in power, if they get power, aren't necessarily better than the ones who were previously in power. Just a great book. I said in my vlog after I read it that it made me care about a horse, and I don't like horses at all. So if you haven't read it, even if you have read it, pick it up again. It's such a short read. It's a great book. And unlike the next book, it's probably a book I will read again. And it seems strange to say that the best book of the month is a book that I will never read again. I just won't. It is Night by Elie Wiesel. It's about his time in concentration camps during the Holocaust. It's just a very dark book. And I said in the vlog, and I probably didn't explain it well, because obviously everything that happened was awful. People were murdered. But what affected me most in the books was how these people's humanity was torn away from them so that they didn't see sometimes their fellow prisoners as human. I know that's not the most awful thing that happened in the Holocaust, but that's just a really affected me. I think both Animal Farm and Night affected me because we see how power or lack of power can change people for the worse. You would like to be able to read that and see kind of the Hollywood version where people were fighting against adversity, but the truth is sometimes people just get beat down. And that's what this book shows. It's not a happy ending at all. And it doesn't even cover the half of what happened to him. Because it's mainly about him and his father. And he has two sisters and a mother who are also in a concentration camp. And once they are separated, when they get to the concentration camp, we pretty much don't get anything about them at all. But terrible things happen to them too, which he's written many books. I'm sure this is covered in other books. This book was devastating enough as it was. And I was like, I'm glad it didn't include this stuff because it was hard enough to get through this book as it was. So that is it. I read 21 books this month, 2 5 stars, 1 1.5 star. A pretty good month overall. And in September, I'm going to be doing a Tolkien readathon. Not actually reading Tolkien books, but books based on the travels of the character Sam Gamgee. That's a character I picked. 13 books based on his travels. So that's it. Please like and subscribe, and I will talk to you next time.